Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to PSGL. George Morgan here, your commentator, alongside me, TK, who is going to be rounding off the season with me.
Down the inside,
Absolutely possible scene.
This is for the win between these two.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
He needs to get it done now.
Blakey will dive to the inside.
We'll go bust. We got our elbows out.
Ronnar takes the lead.
Because here comes Alfie Butcher.
Can't really complain with that one.
It's not going to be easy. The pressure is on, of course.
Yarda Watmere is your champion.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back. This is, of course, PSGL PSF1 on a Monday evening as we leave the States behind and journey across the globe to Asia for Season 40's next chapter. It is round number 9 with only 4 races left. The championship battle poised to swing, potentially from Milton Keynes all the way to Woking. The destiny of the driver's crown could very much change direction tonight. But last week, heading back to the past with the leaders absent, the stage was set for somebody to try and step out of the shadows, and it was Oscar, who had won previously in the season. Bouncing back after a couple of slightly disappointing races, he seized the spotlight, claiming what was, of course, his second win of the season, thrusting himself right back into the championship picture. And with the very same leaders missing again this week, the door is ajar once again for him to transform himself from the hunter to the hunted, from challenger to commander in this title race. Lots up for grabs this evening as we do head to Japan at the famous, legendary Suzuka circuit. In your virtual commentary box for tonight, it is myself, Tom, back alongside me after a week away. It is Daka Dan. How are you doing, my friend?
Very well, Tom, and as always, very excited to be here. We're now in the closing third of the season, which does leave us steeped in anticipation for what is still to come. As you said very rightly, we are seeing a championship battle evolving with the absence of the two drivers who've really defined this season up to this point. As it is, as you said, it is those boys from Woking who, of course, took the 1-2 finish last time out in Kota, moving forward and getting themselves right into the limelight. So things are evolving here in PSF1. We'll see what this 9th chapter has in store.
100%. At one stage, the championship battle and the constructors battle as well were very, very close. With the way things are developing last week and potentially this week as well, they're just starting to move in the favour of the Papaya Squadron, it has to be said. Going last week in Kota, it was an interesting race, bit of a strategy one really. We had a couple of drivers trying to make a 2-stop work with the safety car. We saw others going for a 1-stop. Tony Richet was the big loser out of that. Absolutely cooked his tyres. It was Oscar who managed the race to perfection to come through to pick up that second win of the season. Before we have a gander at the standings, Dan, I want to get your opinions on how critical that win is for Oscar, considering the state of play in the championship we have now.
Yeah, well, obviously it is going to be massively important. There's the materialistic side of it, you could say, obviously bringing him a huge haul of points, getting him right back into the mix. I believe with pole position and the race win, that was 17 points when the two drivers who were 1 and 2 in the standings picked up naught. And of course, there is always that extra momentum that comes with being the last race winner, being the man on top. And I think in another race where the focus is really on him trying to maximize the amount of points he scores rather than directly beating his rivals, I think that's going to be very, very crucial for Oscar. So he's riding the crest of a wave, and we'll see if he can transfer that through to this very different circuit tonight.
100%. Well, let's take a look at the standings and see how things have developed. 4 rounds remain. The title fight has narrowed technically to 4 contenders, yet only 2 of them have made the trip to Suzuka. Alex Lofer and Owen absent for the second week running. They've left their armour on the rack, and in doing so, thrown the championship gates very much wide open. And waiting at the front of the queue is, of course, Oscar. His win last week, it wasn't just timely, potentially transformative. And tonight he has yet another opportunity to tighten his grip right at the top of the standings. Move into first place in the standings for what would be the first time this season. Another victory would stretch his lead to 14 points. Obviously, another couple up for grabs for pole position and fastest lap as well. Could be 16 points clear, and that would be quite the swing considering he was 18 points back but a few weeks ago. But the shadows also still loom. His teammate Volokongan, 18 points off the peak, 14 behind his teammate Oscar. He's been the quiet climber of this championship, it has to be said. 3 podiums in his last 4, in form, finishing second a week ago to his team. And if there was ever a moment to strike, well, surely it's going to be here under Suzuka's cherry blossoms. And then we have to speak about Azam. This is the one I'm most disappointed about. For 7 rounds, he was our Iron Man on the grid, scoring in every single race. But a week ago, he went from the last man standing to the last man to fall. His absence snapping that streak and leaving the stat sheets bare of perfection for the very first time this season. And I, for one, am very disappointed about that. But when we look at how things are shaping up, Alex Lofer obviously not here, 71 points. 2 back is Oscar, a further 2 back is Owen. Do you think this is now well and truly Oscar's championship to lose, considering we don't know what Alex Lofer and Owen are going to be doing over the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, so Alex Lofer, I believe, is struggling with issues with his wheel, and Owen seems to be picking up some bizarre new injury every single week. So, yeah, that does put the ball very much in Oscar's court. He's in the pound seat, but I would not say by any stretch of the imagination that it is his championship just yet, especially with his own teammate Volokongan, who's I mean, what's the stat? However many points finishes he's had, I think only one he's missed, which was the first round in Austria in the last 2 seasons of PSF1. Very much a threat, so consistent, and right up there in recent rounds is going to be a real threat. So, Oscar, we shall see. He's certainly, I would make him the favourite at this stage in the season, but it's there's still so much that can happen in 4 rounds. So I think, yeah, it's difficult to see anyone else outside of those 4 making a way in. But from Oscar's sake, he's just got to stay clinical, do what he's doing all season, and we'll see if he does reap the rewards in the end.
Very much still a lot to play for. I think the stat is 19 out of the last 20 races. Volokongen has finished in the points. And obviously, that slight blotch on the record is the first race of the season from Austria. If you're interested in the Constructors' battle as well, a week ago, the top 3, McLaren, Red Bull and Alpine, were separated by just 9 points. McLaren now, after that 1-2, have a 33-point advantage over Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship. Alpine a further... No, it is not. The championship's in the wrong order. That's slightly annoying. So it is 31 points, in fact, between McLaren and Alpine, 122 to 91, and then Red Bull a further 2 back on 89. They only picked up a 10th place last week for the reserve, stepping in for Alex Lofer. If we look ahead, though, 4 races to go. We've got some very exciting tracks. We're going to bring up the calendar in just a moment's time. Where are you looking at the potential banana skins from a circuit point of view, Dan?
Well, this track is going to be a very key one in terms of the qualifying in particular here at Suzuka. We'll keep an eye on that here tonight. But I think the obvious one to shout out is next week's race in Vegas. That is a circuit with the walls ever near. It's a very unique track in terms of the driving style it rewards, so you could see some surprising results. And of course, there is a massive amount of potential, even for drivers at this level, of big incidents happening. I've seen many a league race have huge moments at Vegas. So I would say for any contenders, that's probably the most likely place to slip up. Of course, every track comes with its dangers, including the one we're visiting here tonight, but I think that round 10 is going to be extremely decisive in how this championship is decided.
It almost will feel a little bit like a jackpot, won't it? Especially for the driver that comes through to pick up what could be a very important victory in the context of the championship. Bobby Dooney supporting Oscar. Hello to everybody that has joined us so far. Qualifying will be starting very, very shortly, not too far away now. The drivers looking to get rocking and rolling, trying to extract the maximum out of themselves. But you can do the same as well, because our friends over at Sim Racing Centres, they've got you absolutely covered. You can unlock those extra tenths of performance using the Pro F125 car setups built by the drivers right here in PSGL. Sim Racing Setups, the best in the business. Rain or shine, call you all the race. They've got esports and stable setups for every single circuit, all available for just £49.49 over at simracingsetups.com. And don't forget to use the code PSGL at checkout for the 5% discount. It'll be very, very beneficial for you. But as we wait to hear the beeps in my ears that will be loading into our qualifying session, let's try and get some predictions in. I think we've got 16 people in the lobby so far. Last week, Oscar needed to get pole position. He delivered. It was right at the end of the session, but he did deliver in the end. Do you think we'll see a repeat of that?
Well, it's certainly hard to predict, especially with the absence of Alex Lofer, who, of course, has completely eviscerated the rest of the field in qualifying throughout the majority of this season. It's hard to say. I do think this one could be very open. Suzuka is a track that tends to produce relatively close time gaps. We do have an overcast session coming in, so we shall see if there's going to be some moisture in the air later on in proceedings. Oscar, of course, is going to be one to look out for. I think there's numerous drivers, though, that could be. I know this is very non-committal for myself, but really it's very hard to say, and I can't wait to see how these drivers take on this circuit, because it is always a treat and a spectacle over a single lap.
A couple of drivers returning as well. Reigning champion Mateo has only raced at about 50% of the Grand Prix so far this season. Not in a championship fight, but very much could be the joker in the pack for, in particular, the two Papaya McLaren cars. Finley as well, usually very quick over one lap, does struggle a little bit for race pace. And I'm looking down there. We've also got the return, because I don't think we've seen him for a while, of Lifebout, former F2 champion, former F2 runner-up as well from a few seasons back. Definitely one to watch as we head into a qualifying session. We haven't actually spoken that much about the circuit itself. Suzuka, one of the most famous racing circuits on the calendar. A figure of 8 masterpiece, beginning with the flowing S's. You've got to get your rhythm right, your precision right. Then you've got the Degners, which you have to have total commitment for, especially in qualifying. Got to be careful of the curbs on the outside, because if you get it slightly wrong, well, you're going to be going from playing F1 25 to Tony Hawk Simulator and find yourself in the gravel on the left-hand side. Hairpin and Casio Triangle, probably the areas that we're going to be looking at for overtaking-wise. The hairpin that we're just coming up to now with the Haas of Finlay. And then Spoon and 130R, two of the most famous corners, not just on the circuit, but on the F1 calendar as well. We could potentially see some moves in and around there as well. But in qualifying, it's all going to be about rhythm and flow. Got to get yourself hooked up and get into the groove as quickly as you possibly can.
Yeah, confidence is adamant around this track and carrying apex speed through corners. Very flowing track, and if you're just a little bit off in terms of commitment, that's going to throw you right off in terms of lap time. We'll see how it gets on. We're going to have the Ferrari of Dirk, the first driver, over the line, so let's see how he tackles this track steeped in F1 history and racing history as a whole. Barreling down towards the first corner, use that camera to turn in, braking extremely late down to fourth gear, doesn't quite get the curb on the inside, but good traction on the way out as you head into the S section. With this new physics model, you can take these corners with very little of a left. You can see him just barely losing the throttle trace. Little lefts all the way throughout as he heads through Dunlop, keeps that car nice and stable, flat out, and on the way out we go. We'll see what the first sector time is going to be. Should be in the low to mid 31s. Yeah, 31.3 is very solid. Through the Degners, flying it through. Tough to get traction on the exit here, but he gets it. Plants that throttle pedal down as we've got a driver out the session as him. I'm not sure if that's on track. It does appear to be. So that's very poor luck for the Williams driver, the ever consistent so far throughout this season. We'll keep an eye on Dirk though as he heads up towards Spoon curve. You've got to chain these corners together. Try not straighten the car up in the middle, but he runs a little bit wide of the white lines, and well, you're not going to see many penalties in the race, I think. Invalidations in qualifying can be plentiful, and unfortunately for Dirk, falling foul of that. So we'll keep an eye on the Alpine of Lifeboat heading up through Spoon curve. Now a couple of bites of the cherry on the way into that corner, and again just missing the apex a little bit of the second part. This track is so tough to nail over a single lap. If you're in the 108s here to the first two sectors, you're going pretty well, and a couple of errors I think have drawn Lifeboat short of that. He is going to get a lovely slipstream from the Mercedes in front, although they always come together, breaking down into the Casio Triangle. Third gear, again has to hesitate to turn the car in. It doesn't look like the most hooked up lap from the Dutchman. He comes up to the line now. It's going to be a 126.3, but I think it's safe to say there's a lot more to come.
100%. Oscar not looking particularly steady coming out of the Casio Triangle. He'll cut the beam, but does go a couple of tenths faster. 26.1, still not into the 1 minute 25s as yet. Euro starting into P3, 26.4, and Finlay as well on 27.7. Not entirely convincing there. Reigning champion Armateo, maybe there's a little bit of rust to shake off there. Sixth fastest at the moment, 126.6 as Nico Source. Haven't seen him for a few weeks as well, the Williams driver. 126.4 as Evan Nye was temporarily inside the top 5. Now bumped down. Ryderdal could have won rounds 1, 2, and 3. No, it wasn't. It was Tony Roche. Pardon me, but he's going to cut the beam. Was definitely in the picture last week as well, Ryderdal. Had some excellent pace, just got caught up with penalties as you can do at Coates. He goes P7 on a 26.5, but it is Oscar. Needs to pick up that pole position to try and get himself just 1 point behind Alex Lofer in the championship, and so far so good.
Yeah, very excellent start for SEI Oscar, and it'll be I know he has his teammate, but I think he'll be rather pleased to see the gulf between himself and Volakongan, who's establishing himself as a big-time championship rival. So Oscar off to a very ideal start. I do think there's a lot more pace in the track. I think some of these drivers are going to be dipping into the 1 minute 25s further down the line. We'll see if they can manage that one. But yeah, Oscar off to a great start. Marius Formula trailing very closely, and Lifeboat, of course, I caught quite a lot of that lap from the Alpine driver, and there seemed to be plenty on the table. So yeah, Lifeboat, the former PSF2 champion, I think is certainly a threat in this session going forward. Most drivers done with the first runs. It's Lafferty, I think, is the only driver who's going on a full hell for leather lap at the moment as he heads down towards Spoon curve. You can see him using that little green AstroTurf to open up the corner on the way in, and again, just not quite getting that second apex. It's such a difficult combination of corners, and even testing these very, very elite drivers here in PSF1. He does a 109.4 to the first two sectors, which is putting him right in the mix in that sort of 26.4, 26.5 range if he gets a good run. He does lock the rears a little bit heading into the Casio Triangle, but good traction on the way out for the RB driver, and he does do a 1:26.5, good for 9th place at the moment. So that's the first runs down, just over 6 minutes gone in the session, and well, as you were alluding to earlier, Tom, Oscar right into the championship picture after last week, and he's carrying on where he left off.
100%. Does need to be careful though, like you said, life back with a bit of time left on the table. Marius Formula as well this season has been a fairly consistent feature at the front end in the qualifying session, just hasn't always been able to translate it into a decent race result, and that's actually what we saw a few seasons ago when he was in F2, I think on F1 24 and the end of F1 23. Was really solid over one lap, had decent race pace, but just lacking a little bit of consistency from time, which turned out to be his kryptonite. But on the front row provisionally at the moment, and less than a 10th down on Oscar, who is surely going to be the championship leader come the end of our Japanese Grand Prix. If you are new to PSGL, PSF1, first of all, where have you been? Very poor from yourself. 18-minute qualifying session, first of all, to stick your teeth into before we go into our 50% Grand Prix. I believe that is 26 laps. It might be 27.
27, I think.
Yes, 27 laps. I think it's 53-lap Grand Prix in real life, isn't it? So it should be 27 total. Possibility for a two-stop to work. It's not quite as marginal as maybe we saw a couple of weeks ago in Hungary, especially considering we saw a safety car there as well. So expect to see most drivers go for a one-stop, but there is definitely a possibility, if we see the safety car make an appearance, to just switch things up ever so slightly.
The other question, I think, is if they are going for a one-stop, the tyre of choice to start the race on. I've seen in the PC races throughout this week that, well, of course, on most tracks on this game, you're going to generally see drivers starting on the medium and going to the hard. The other way around does seem a bit more viable this time out, and certain other drivers are looking to try that. So there's a couple of strategic elements that are going to come into play, as they always do, on this game. But nevertheless, what you're going to see in the next 10 minutes is going to be imperative, because there's just one DRS zone, and we've gone this long without mentioning dirty air, but it is very crucial at this track, especially in that first sector with all those mid-speed, high-load corners where that dirty air is going to be very lethal in terms of the following. So overtaking is going to be tough, and this is going to be another one of those tracks like Hungary, like Imola, as I've watched dirt going round in the first sector, showing what can happen when you push it right to the limit there. But yeah, these qualifying laps are going to mean a lot, because this is another track where moving up in the race, unless we do get rain, is going to be very difficult.
100%. And Dirk finished on the podium a week ago at Kota. Not quite translating that form at the moment. Halfway through the session, has had 2 stabs at trying to get a lap on the ball. Been unsuccessful on both attempts. Nikosaurus, not too much rust for him to shake off. Haven't seen him for a few weeks, but nestled right inside the top 5 on a 26.4. Having him in position number 4. You would imagine this is going to be a used tyre run, second attempt of the session. Will it be an improvement through the first sector? Decent time. 31.2 finds just under 2/3 of a tenth of a second. A lot of decimal points for us to get involved with there. Coming up into the hairpin now, try and get the car rotated. Can be a bit of a tricky traction zone, but putting his foot to the floor, using the curb on the outside. That's an interesting one. Some drivers do like to V the corner up as much as possible, then blast through the run down into Spoon Curve, which is, like we saw earlier on with the Ferrari Dirt, probably the one place that people need to be concerned about track limits. You can just get a little bit lazy through the second part of Spoon. Just try and carry that little bit too much speed over the curb on the right-hand side, and then through lap in the nearest bin that you can find. Are we still finding time? Yes, indeed we are. Nearly 2/10 of a second. Good first sector, good middle sector. Will we go 3 for 3 with Nikosaurus with the Casio Triangle? The only braking zone left to negotiate. A little bit of a lock-up on the front right. You can really cut the curves through the final couple of corners, but just cutting it a little bit too much there with Nikosaurus. A little bit over-ambitious with the track limits, and that does indeed throw the lap in the bin, and he'll remain for the time being in position 4.
Yeah, he took a lot of curb in the first part too, also going through in second gear, interestingly enough. Much more curb than I've just seen Volakongan take, who missed the optimal line a little bit. Lifeout does find some time, goes to a close second. Volakongan improves to 7th, and well, he isn't normally a qualifying specialist as such, but we certainly be looking for more further down the line in this session. Oscar himself is still finding time out there, heading out of the Casio Triangle, manages to use the curb to open up the track and get good traction. Is it going to be an improvement? Yes, it is! A 1:26.0 for the man who's so close in the championship and looking to draw in front. As you said, he's looking to try and take the championship lead. He's got a great chance of doing so after this round, and so far in this qualifying session looks to be a class apart. There's still time in the track, I do think. There's still drivers making improvements out there. You saw the Mercedes of Evanai coming through, goes up into 6th on a 1:26.492, but Oscar just under 2/10 of a second clear. We saw Lifeboat find time out there, but not quite enough to overhaul him, and Oscar drawing further clear on these seconds runs.
Really looking hooked up, isn't he, in that McLaren car? Lawrence was seeing going for a lap at the moment, but bounces over the curbs of the first part of Degner, takes a trip through the gravel, somehow doesn't invalidate the lap time, even though he went about 50 yards off track. It is going to continue on, but those tyres are not going to be in the best shape possible, and his confidence would have been dented ever so slightly by that. I haven't actually seen that before. I've seen people really try and cut the curb at the inside of Degner 1, but I haven't seen anybody go airborne, as we saw there with Lawrence bunny hopping himself into the gravel. Maris 4 was an interesting one. He only improved by, I think it was 4 milliseconds, first run to second run, so just leaving himself under the cosh ever so slightly. It's still the same top 5 actually, I think, that we had previously. Just the two Alpines have swapped positions. No improvement for Nico Source. Jeroen getting a little bit closer to Nico in 4th and 5th respectively. We are going to carry on board, with Lawrence as we go through the Casio Triangle. Invalidates on the inside, so that is not good news at all, and that is another lap that's going to be thrown in the pin, and he almost smashes into the pit wall, which would not have been ideal at all and would have consigned into a start on the back row of the grid. I have been looking as well for Azim to see why he's retired in the pit lane. I haven't seen any notes of a quali ban for him. Enzo Sabaton's got a quali ban next time we see, if we see Enzo Sabaton at any point in the remainder of this season, but nothing from Azim as far as I'm aware.
No, but I do actually think, I think we missed it, but I think it was out on track. I didn't quite get a good look at it in the end. But yeah, for Azim, who again has been metronomically consistent throughout this season, and Dirk has another off, and this time it's a big one. And that is the session to a close for the Ferrari driver. At the exact same point, he's tried to push the envelope further and further throughout this session, and in the end he is punished with ultimately no time being set on the board. He just caught the grass on the outside of I believe it was turn 6, and just spearing off uncontrollably into the wall. Leaning on the car hard in that first sector, when you're using especially the setups that these guys are using, you just overstep the mark, the consequences will be dire.
It is a strange place to lose it though. Yes, you do have to be very precise through the sweeps of the first sector. If you do put too much of your car on the curbs, they can spit you into the barriers and into the gravel, as we saw with Dirk there, but definitely didn't expect him to crash twice at that corner. Remember, he had a whoopsie there about 5 minutes ago on his second attempt in this session. Now throwing it into the wall, and like we said a few minutes ago as well, that podium from last week is now feeling like quite a long time ago. Lafayette's managed to split the two Alpines, by the way, up into P3 as Yasser Saki retires from the session as well. I believe that is on circuit, but I can still see that green Aston Martin dot moving. Nico Source is going again as well, improving once again in sectors 1 and sector 2. Can he do the Casio Triangle correctly this time? There is a little bit of traffic he might have to contend with. I think they're too far in the distance to really put him off. Cutting the second part, a little bit of wheel spin on the exit. Now he's just pulling gears up to the line, keeping it tight to the right hand side. Cutting the beam, he does find an improvement, but stays only P5. Shaves nearly 0.2 of a second off his personal best though.
He's so much more aggressive than every other driver heading through the Casio Triangle. Different gear choice too. Really going for rotation instead of stability. Don't know whether that's helping him or not against the rest of this field, but at the moment he does set in a solid P5. The reigning champion, the 3-time champion, Armateo, doesn't seem to quite be finding the time. This doesn't seem like his game, and of course he hasn't been able to really commit to the season, and he doesn't find time on that occasion. Remains sat on his 1:26.6 for the moment. Oscar still very much on top in this session that hasn't really come alive just yet. And am I seeing rain out there? Do my eyes deceive me?
Yes, it is raining. I can see the streaks on the Haas of Finlay. He was up by 1.1 seconds. He needs to try and get this lap time in and bank, because it's probably the last attempt he's going to get, and we may have a little bit of filling to do come the end of the qualifying campaign. Has a couple of stabs at getting it into the Casio Triangle, but just a little bit too ambitious. Cuts the inside, as we saw, I think it was Dirk doing a few moments ago, and that is an invalidated lap time. Would have been a 26.6, only would have picked him up one place, to be fair, ahead of the reigning champion of Armateo. But as the rain begins to fall from the sky, a lot of drivers are out on the circuit, but I'd be surprised if we see too many improvements now, because the conditions are going to keep deteriorating for the remaining 3 minutes.
It's going to keep worsening. We'll see if these guys can still find some grip out there. I'm watching on board with Jeroen heading through 200R towards the Spoon at curve as Nico Sauce brings his session to a close. Many of these drivers, I think it will be a futile effort to find more time, but we'll see what Jeroen is heading through this second sector, gets onto the curb nicely. There'll still be some grip on the track, the slicks will still be usable, but whether you can put down a solid lap in qualifying remains to be seen. Jeroen, he's not far down, but at the moment he can't quite manage it, as I think Reidadal has bent it heading out of the Casio Triangle, so I think the grip is rapidly fading from this track surface, and I'm with you. I'd be very surprised to see many, if any, improvements at this point now.
Yeah, Riderdow chucked it into the pit wall, so that was his session brought to a premature end. Volokongan returns to pit road as well. Marius Formula is down by 1/3 of a second. Lifebout is down by 1.3 seconds. Oscar isn't improving either, and I think that is going to be qualifying done. Slightly prematurely, didn't quite get the 18 minutes, plus the technical injury time that we get at the end when the checkered flag flies. But it is going to be Oscar, back-to-back pole positions. He needed to deliver in both qualifying sessions a week ago in Kota and now in Japan, and he has done so by nearly 0.2 of a second. One of the bigger pole margins that we've seen so far this season. Alex Lofer has been our pole king, still got that 100% record every race he's attended. He has started from pole position, but in his absence, it's been Oscar now and pastly Owen as well, picking up pole position. And that is the 1 point. That means he is just 1 point behind Alex Lofer in the championship.
Yeah, so, well, that's halving the deficit that he has to the man in front of him, the Spaniard Alex Lofer. So, yeah, Oscar getting off to the perfect start, and it doesn't seem like many of these other drivers have hooked up this track to the extent that they would have liked. So, yeah, Oscar, and he is a driver who's typically, I mean, he is quick over one lap, we all know that, but he's also usually pretty clinical in the race and capable of some pretty stunning overtakes too, should he need to. From pole position, he may not have to, but yeah, that's a worrying sight for the rest of this grid. He's very comprehensively ahead of the rest of the field. And, well, we'll see what happens in the Grand Prix to come. But, yes, certainly for the Norwegian, who's put himself potentially in pole position for the championship at large, and he's certainly put himself in the best spot for the Grand Prix to come. At a track like Suzuka, this is one of the more important poles that you can grab all season.
100%. Not the longest run down into turn number 1 either, and it's not the heaviest braking zone as well. So if you do get off the grid well, you should be in a decent position to hold on to your track position, at least for the first sector. Maybe if you have a bit of a messy one, then somebody could just try and nab that place from under your nose going through the sweeps, or maybe into the hairpin as well, coming out through the Degnus. But it is Papaya on pole once again. Oscar by 1.5 ahead of Lifebout. Lafty in P3. Good lap from himself to get that in before the rain started to come down. Marius Formula and Nico Source rounding out your top 5. Evan Nye's been very impressive since coming up from F2. He will start from P6 ahead of Yorona. Volokonga, not good for his championship charge. Down in P8, his teammate on pole needs to have a good race. Try and make up some places early on. Riderdow, Fraser, Mateo and Finlay. Your other qualifiers. 4 drivers failed to get a time on the board. Dirk, Yasusaki, Azim and Lawrence.
That is qualifying now in the books, and we'll look forward to the Japanese Grand Prix. So drivers going to be getting ready, making their final preparation soon. We'll see how it gets on, but yeah, I'm excited. I just want to have a quick look and see what the conditions are going to be. We had rain at the end of that qualifying session, but it seems unlikely we're going to get any here.
Weather set fair. A little bit of cloud cover, but you can see the blue sky just behind the clouds. And I doubt we're going to see any rain. And to be honest, I think drivers would have come in either the chat or had a little bit of a chatter in the Discord server saying that there was rain on the horizon. So it is going to be a classic dry race. Whether we'll see the safety car make an appearance, that will have to be seen. Dirk obviously binned it going through the S's in the first sector. Maybe with heavier fuel and some less grippy tyres, a few other drivers might get caught out by that as well. Remember as well, if you don't want to find yourself spinning out on track, check out Sim Racing Setups, the best in the business. If you head over there, use the code PSGL at checkout. That will give you a 5% discount. They're setups that have been developed by the very people that you see running here in PSGL. Esports ready setups and stable setups for you to get involved in. All available for £49.99 over at simracingsetups.com.
And of course, if you use the code PSGL, which you can find the link to their site in the description as well, you can get 5% off at checkout using that code. So we can look forward now to the Grand Prix ahead of us. We should get it underway very, very shortly indeed, as you are out of the session, mate.
That's not good news, everybody. Network cable unplugged. That's unideal, I think, is the best way to put that one. So if you could just if you could invite me back, and I'll try and get back in the session as quickly as possible. I might still be able to join, actually.
Yeah, you might be able to use the group invite. If not, then of course I can send you one myself. Also keeping an eye to make sure the race hasn't quite gotten underway just yet. So do keep me updated, and I'll keep you updated as well as we can. Where are you? Still haven't quite gotten underway just yet. We're still okay.
We're in a loading screen.
Dear, oh dear.
So hopefully this will be okay. Please wait. Hopefully I won't be waiting too long. And hopefully the game decides that they can throw me into action. And we can see what goes on the rundown into turn number 1. Obviously not a heavy braking zone. Starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. That's a little bit concerning. I can see the ready sign. So hopefully we're going to be thrown in at the deep end. Everybody on 10 tips here.
Oh, we are getting underway. I think I'll cover the start for you until you can get yourself into the running. So we are away at Suzuka, and it is Oscar leading from Lifeboat off the line, but Lifeboat a much better initial getaway, taking the inside line into turn 1 and taking the lead away from the championship contending McLaren. Lafferty slots nicely into that third position on the road. Volakogan has made a good start too. He's on the outside of Evan Nye, going side by side through those S's. Off the road is Dirk again at the back of the field, and the Ferrari recovers back into line, but missing an end plate off that Ferrari car. He's an torrid start to his evening. It is Lifeboat leading from Oscar on the road. They fire through the second sector now, and I believe you do have us back underway. So I'll hand over to you, Tom. Let's get this started.
Timed absolutely to perfection. Rejoined the session as the lights went out and we were racing, and that was really interesting from Volakonga, diving down the inside into the hairpin. I think that's Finlay trying to nab 11th place off the pans of the reigning champion. Armateur's is going to try and fight this on the rundown into Spoon Curve. Couple of corners to negotiate. The strategy is apparently medium, soft, soft, medium, medium, soft the other strategy. I think it's going to be a one-stop for the majority of drivers. Armateur falls off the circuit though, might hand 12th place over to his teammate as well, just struggling I think on the hard compound tyres. So the reigning champion of Armateur has already relinquished the places to both of the Haas cars, Finlay and Fraser in 10th and 11th. Volokong getting his elbows out as well. Chucked it up the inside of your own, who's not had a particularly good start. The Aston Martins side by side through 130R. Yasuyasaki desperate to get past his teammate, now launches it down the inside into the Casio triangle. They make contact not once but twice. Still Armateur getting his elbows out and off the circuit. This time it's Yasuyasaki for P13, now down into P15, but his teammate's still very much vulnerable. Look at this, Azam squeezed to the wall. Barrichello Schumacher style, and not enough spaces left. Front wing damage for the Aston Martin of Armateur, and that felt a little bit unnecessary as he's going to fall off the circuit again. The Aston Martin civil war will continue, although Yasuyasaki I think will be pleased to see the back of his teammate now.
Oh, tempers flaring between those two Aston Martins. They take swipes at each other, heading out of turns at number 1 and 2. But the cost for Matteo is dear, and that is very costly front wing damage for 2 cars in this race. We saw Dirk falling off the circuit earlier on. So drama at the back and relatively calm stuff up at the front. Lifeboat with that fantastic launch off the line leads away from Oscar, and he's got the advantage of nice clean air in front of him. He can run pretty much entirely his own race. He's saving battery nicely. Oscar going with him at the moment. Most of these medium runners have kept themselves nicely in contention, and it seems like we may be settling into a state of stasis already. Earlier on in this race, overtaking will prove very, very tricky, especially for those right in the heart of the battle, in the heart of that DRS drive. Rydell threatening your own somewhat, and Azim, the only car really left in this running who does have the hard tyres on. So he's going a different way on strategy. The hard tyres are pretty quick and pretty swift from early on, so he's keeping up pretty much okay, but no real dramas further up the field.
Yeah, hard tyre, definitely a really good race tyre, considering as well you get a lot of energy into them, into that first sector in particular. Tyre temperatures shouldn't be too much of a concern, as if he can just try and stay intact with this DRS train that is still intact from first down into P14, he's going to be in a good spot. Your own having to throw the defensive move into turn number 1 because he's got Rydell all over the back of him. In fact, he's tapping the back of him. Your own taking a trip off the circuit. Contact between himself and Rydell almost rejoins into the path of Lawrence and the Williams of Azam as well. And down into P12 we go, the kick Sauber, and that looked a little bit unnecessary there from Rydell, just tripping over the kick Sauber, tapping the back of him as a love tap, but I don't think your own is going to be a particularly willing recipient of that bit of contact.
No, certainly not. He tried to keep the car in the middle of the track, and Rydell was looking for that switchback. So in the end, that is how things end up. And Rydell, well, he is up into 8th position on the road, but yeah, that is going to be one for the stewards, I do think. He was looking very feisty though, very aggressive, using a lot of battery, so he's not being willing at the very least to set in the DRS trade. The Red Bull driver, the Super Swede, is going to look to try and make some moves out there, chasing down the championship contending McLaren of Volakongen just a little bit further up the road. That altercation too has put Jeroen under some sort of pressure, and he's working hard to stay with Lawrence. He held up Azim as well in the meantime, who's managed to regroup and stay with it. The DRS train somewhat still intact as Dirk has had yet another off down at the back of the field. His nightmare run continues tonight. End of the third lap, still Lifeboat leading comfortably from Oscar. Fairly calm up at the front of the field. It is Reiderdal though, who does seem to have plenty of pace, but already in the wars throughout this race, charging after Volakongen, looking to make progress and really forcing things out there.
Applying the blowtorch now to the back of the Papaya McLaren car. Less than 0.3 of a second the gap as they went through turn 1. Got to be careful though, because Fraser nipping at the heels of the Red Bull Racing car as well, and Dirk seemingly really struggling. Has absolutely no stability in that Scarlet Ferrari car. If only he was using a sim racing setup, that would be absolutely ideal for him. Check him out, everybody. 5% discount over on simracingsetups.com with the code PSGL. Gap out in front is still 0.4 of a second. Lifeboat holding firm ahead of Oscar, trading blows on the opening lap. It's not alarm bells being run just yet for Oscar, because he'll still pick up a very healthy chunk of points that will catapult him comfortably into the lead of the championship. Marosford also examining the rear end of the RB of Lafferty in the battle for the final spot on the podium. They've just left Nico Source a little bit wanting. Fairly equidistant, the gaps in this leading group of, let's call it 7 cars, before you get to Rideout, who's really underneath the rear wing of Volakongen in 7th and 8th place.
How hard is he working those tyres, I wonder, following so close behind the drivers in at front. A lot of these guys are going to be pitting relatively early in the race, maybe as early as lap 7 or 8, to get those hard tyres on. Again, the mediums, not the best race tyre around this track, especially in comparison to the hards, so these guys will be trying to judge that pit lap very, very smartly, especially with the field running so close out there. Up at the front, Oscar, I think he may be getting a little bit interested. I thought he was, but he decides to against that attack on Lifeboat. Lifeboat using considerably more battery, trying to keep him at arm's length further back. As him on the move, Jeroen has been dropped from the group in front, and that is going to be easy pickings for the Williams driver up in a 12th place, and we'll see what he could do with clear air on those hard tyres further back. Yes, Saki is trying to force a move in a turn 2 on Jeroen, but the gap doesn't get open up. So finally, a little bit of a break in the field, and Azim now will see how good these hard tyres are functioning. 2 seconds the gap to Lawrence up in front. Of course, these guys are pretty much all running at the pace of the race leader Lifeboat, so Azim's going to have his work cut out, but if he can get himself back into range, he's given himself that strategic flexibility to go after it later in the race.
Oh, was Dirk 10-second penalty for corner cutting. I would imagine he's going to make his way into the pit lane and retire. There's the second 10-second penalty for speeding in the pits, and that is the strikeout. Strike 1, strike 2, and now he retires from the session. Not good news from Dirk. Podium last week, retiring within the first 5 laps here in Japan. And just going back to the lead battle, if you remember to a week ago in Kota, Oscar actually spent the majority of the early stages of the Grand Prix and in the middle phase as well, behind what was Tony Roche last week, who had the clean air out in front, but still managed to burn his tyres up considerably more than Oscar did, who was sat in second place, sat crucially in the dirty air of the car in front. So that just maybe tells us a little bit about how Oscar's looking to manage this race. He'll be looking to look after those tyres, baby the front tyres, baby the rear tyres, through some of the traction zones that we see around this circuit, though he is very close to the back of Lifeboat, who has a bit of a wobble coming out of the Casio triangle. Is this the opportunity to get the lead of the race back? He's been handed it on a plate. He's just got to take the meal and consume it, and he does around the outside. Doesn't need the braking zone. A turn number 1, DRS flap open, and that is the lead of the race back for the pole sitter and soon to be championship leader. Bit of a battle going on at Haas as well. Finlay disposing of his teammate Fraser. They held the final 2 spots inside the top 10. Got to be careful that they can just cling onto the coattails of Rideout in front as well, who has just called his charge behind Volakongen in 8th place.
Setting statically for now. Good move from Oscar up at the front. Lifeboat, yeah, ran it in deep into the Casio triangle, and as he tried to recover for traction, the rear tyres said no. So Oscar maybe not leaning on them quite as much. He is usually very patient in races, and even with a 7/10 gap, he's not dumping the battery just yet. He's not really looking to win this race early on. Maybe he'll try and smell blood down there, as Jeroen has managed to repass Azim down at the Degners. Didn't see how that happened. Maybe a mistake courtesy of the Williams driver, but these guys are ultimately just going backwards in relation to the race leading train. So at the moment, the top 11 are pulling very far clear as Yasuo Saki tries to pressure Azim and gets a big face full of dirty air and understeer, keeping him locked in that 14th position for the time being. Yeah, very, very calm up at the front. Oscar seems to be upping the pace of this train to now that he is out in front. Big runs through the Casio Triangle. He is using a bit more battery, so I said he was being patient, but maybe he sensed that Lifebout is struggling to stay with him. He's used about half of his battery on this lap, going for the kill. There's no DRS for nearly a full lap. Maybe he can try and put the rest of this grid to the sword and break away from this PSF1 grid.
100% was definitely looking to stretch his legs here, as is Azim trying to take 12th place back off the hands of your own. Little bit of a slide from Azim at the apex of turn 1. They're going to battle it out through 2 as well. Your own trying to hang on around the outside. Going to have the inside for the next sequence of corners, but around the outside we go with the Williams of Azim. Got more grip traction and confidence on those hard compound tyres, which are definitely the compound you want to be on at this stage of the race. And for the second time in 2 laps, the Williams does get past the kick salve and into P12. And it's interesting that Azim wasn't really able to make any real impression to that group in front, because this isn't really a circuit where you think the DRS training is going to be particularly strong. Just the one DRS zone on the run out of the Casio Triangle into turn 1. With the dirty air experiencing through the first sector, it's not the easiest of tracks to follow really, really closely. So that does surprise me a little bit.
It is, certainly, and well, you can see the issue with following, though, that Lifebout is putting up, because Oscar is putting him very much teetering on the edge of that 1 second. He had it over 9/10 of a second briefly. Lifebout working very, very hard, but managing to keep his chances alive just for the time being. The thing is, he's using more battery than Oscar is, though. Can he keep this resistance up? The benefit he may have is that we're coming towards that point where you're going to see drivers thinking about making that swap over to the hard tyre from this medium. We'll see if anyone is going to pull the plug early on lap 7. I'd be surprised but not shocked. It seems as though the majority, in fact all of them, are going to remain out there. So it's not time for pit stops just yet in this Japanese Grand Prix. I would have considered it if I were one of the, especially the likes of Yasir and your own. If you need any way into this race, that would be your ticket. But maybe they are just too far back to consider that. That undercut's going to mean plenty, though. I do think getting fresh set of hards on against these fading mediums is going to be very important. So drivers near the back of this train, I wonder if they're going to pull the pin, maybe even on this lap, get a fresh set of boots on and try and move up the order, especially with overtaking proving so difficult.
100%. I think that undercut is going to be incredibly powerful, because once these mediums start to go, you really feel it and you really have to grapple for grip to try and keep yourself pointing on the straight. And now you'll be desperate, begging to try and get a new set of tyres on. But maybe the game here for some of these drivers is just take this early pain. Whether they want to relinquish a little bit of track position, that remains to be seen. Pitting on lap number 8, I think you're asking a lot out of yourself to try and drag those hard compound tyres to the end of the race. Yes, they're a very good race tyre, but you are putting a lot of load on. If you're in the mid-pack as well, you're probably going to come out in a bit of DRS strain. You're also going to have worse tyres. You're going to have to work a little bit harder just to keep yourself in contention. So I'm thinking maybe around lap 10, maybe a couple of laps later, depending on how hard the drivers are pushing here. We've seen that Oscar has definitely been stretching his legs a little bit out in front, going blow for blow with Lifebout really over the last couple of laps. So this is where the strategy cars will just begin to be dealt to a lot of the drivers.
Heading on to lap 9 now, and still no movement. So it seems as though maybe the hard tyres just don't have the potential mileage to go from this distance, and these drivers a little bit hesitant to pull that pin, as we were alluding to. It seems as though Lifebout has managed to recover somewhat. He's got to within half a second, and it does seem as though Oscar is, he's got 90% ERS. He's certainly not desperate to win this race in the first stint. He's, like I said, a very patient driver. He knows the opportunity that he's got here, and he's just trying to run an error-free race. He's in the best position at the moment, leading the way, dragging the field along, not really under any immediate pressure, and so he's just trying to drive clean lines, clean moves, and just keep this race. He did get jumped off the line, recovered well. Now he's leading the way and doing a perfect job out there on the track at the moment. So he's virtually dragging along the majority of this field. Still an 11-car group for the lead. Not much changing in the order. I think these drivers have probably accepted that they're just going to have to run in order. Everyone's on the same age tyres, maybe not the same wear, but not great deviations in pace, and penalties like those for Rydal and Finlay with the field so close could be very decisive.
Yeah, going through Spoon, first part of Spoon, so Maybe just carrying a little bit too much speed going into it and just running over the white lines. And they're pretty early penalties to get on a circuit where there aren't too many locations on the circuit where you've got to worry about track limits. Maybe through the Degners if you carry a little bit too much speed. Maybe if you're a little bit lazy going through the Casio triangle as well. So they need to make sure that that doesn't spiral and it doesn't put themselves in a difficult situation. Volokonga's getting out of a difficult situation though. Frustrated in the DRS train. I'm not going to ride on board because the game's putting him at max revs down the pit lane. So we're going to get off that and save our ears. Jerome with a 10-second penalty for speeding in the pits. Also decided to bite the bullet and now retires straight away. So obviously didn't fancy seeing that one out. Volokonga is going to strap on the set of white striped hard compound tyres. That is a very long stop. Thank you, game, for showing us that one. And he emerges, almost drops it coming out of the pit lane on some icy cold tyres. And now we'll see how strong this undercut really is.
Yeah, he's got to get those tyres up into the operating window. He's got some very good corners to pull that off, heading through this first sector. He's going to struggle for grip a little bit initially, but once he gets those tyres fired up, he should be gaining rapidly on the drivers in front, and they will know it. Of course, that pit stop too has created a bit of a gulf in the train. Riedel was distanced. He was, of course, the car running frustrated behind the McLaren for many laps, unable to really apply much pressure. And now he's the one under pressure to try and chase this gap down. His Lifeboat running second on the road, but chasing a race win. That is not going to help his ambitions one bit. That is a time penalty for the Alpine driver. That's going to be a major setback for him. Is he going to try and gain an advantage on the man in front through an undercut? We shall see. That pit stop for Volokonga is certainly going to have many of these drivers on notice and trying to cover off. Of course, the likes of Evan Nye, who was running just in front on the road. Oscar in Lifeboat follows suit, and it seems as though the majority of these drivers are going to do the same. Very busy pit lane at the end of lap 10. Marius Formula assumes the lead of the race, still being tracked by Riedel, Fraser and Lawrence, but the rest of these drivers in this train are going to come out, and where will they be relative to the charging McLaren of Volokonga?
It'll be really interesting, isn't it? Surprised that Riedel stayed out. Marius Formula, his hand was forced. His teammate was in the pits, did not want to double stack behind Lawrence, or behind Lifeboat, I should say. Coming out of the pits, there goes Oscar, there goes Lifeboat. You can see the second Papaya McLaren. Volokonga is going to pick up a couple of places. He's going around the outside of Nico's Source. I think that's a net P4 now for Volokonga from what was 7th when he came into the pit. So that has worked out. The one-lap undercut has gained him potentially 3 places here, with Marius Formula carrying on. And that has worked out to get Volokonga some track position. Now he's just got to try and pull some punches, try and make some overtakes and put some pressure on his teammate and main championship rival. He'll get a freebie, of course, if it stays as is with that 3-second penalty for Lifeboat. But Volokonga, things just starting to look up for him now.
But they're looking even more up for his rival and teammate, who's managed to break DRS through that pit cycle. So Lifeboat not quite maybe as aggressive as Oscar was through there. The gap now over a second, and he's got a real task on his hands to try and bring Oscar back. He was already struggling to stay with him when he did have the DRS. He's pushing Lafferty to the limit too, and these gaps opening up could be what Volokonga needs to pick off some overtakes potentially. He does have older tyres to his name. As off the road in front of him is Lafferty in the RB, and that's going to bring Volokonga much nearer. He was working hard to stay with Lifeboat too. Now he's going to have 3 very interested drivers chasing him down. The race leaders do predictably come in. Riedel, the only one to extend. He's going for fresher tyres at the end of the race. We'll see if it pays off as they bunch up in this battle. To the inside looks Volokonga on Lafferty. He, I think though, was a bit of a preemptive move, looking for better traction on the way out. He does have the rear step out, but he's going to be charging. Can he take this position away as they barrel down the main straight then? The McLaren chasing the RB, and in the end Lafferty, I think, is just going to have to let that one go. Further back they all come together though, as Evan Nye is on the inside of Nico Sauce and picks him off. An opportunistic move from the Mercedes driver, gets the move done. Very nicely done as they all stacked up behind Lafferty. Evan Nye, nice clinical driving from the Mercedes, gets up into 8th place on the road, chasing down Lafferty. Volokonga hitting this train, but all that battling has separated them from the top 2. Lifeboat's been unable to stay with Oscar, and Oscar now very firmly in the pound seat in this race.
Red carpet being rolled out for Oscar here to take a commanding lead in the championship. Evan Nye is off through the first Stegner, bringing gravel back onto the circuit. He's now got Nico Soares potentially thinking, hang on a minute, you've just overtaken me and now you've thrown it off the circuit. I want to have a little bit of this back. Marius Formula has been spat out of the pit lane into this scrap as well. P10 on the road. I think that's a net 7th place for Marius Formula. Once Riedel, Azim and Yasser Saki make their way into the pit lane. Still surprised that Riedel's out there on the medium compound tyres. He's going to be absolutely miles back, but if he can use that tyre offset to his advantage, could be a very, very interesting watch coming the end of this race with that Red Bull charging through the field. Finlay on the back of this trade as well. Fraser's just been detached ever so slightly, as has the Mercedes of Loris, and this just changes the complexion ever so slightly out in front. 1.7 between Oscar and Life, but Oscar can really control his pace now, can really work those tyres into a nice operating window. Battles going on behind. There was a Maris Formula, it was Finlay up the inside, and Maris Formula into the Casio triangle, clipped the back of the Alpine, and now chipped off a bit of his front wing.
Yeah, they all came together under braking there, and Finlay just getting caught out, unfortunately. Now, with that damage, he's got no battery too, I think draining it all in frustration. And at a track like Suzuka, you need all the downforce you can get, and Finlay, I think, making any sort of progress from here on out is going to be a very tall order for the Brit. And the Haas, and maybe his teammate behind, will be getting interested in having that place back off him. They swapped places earlier in the race in favour of Finlay. We shall see. Up and front, still the rest of that train very much intact, and of course that penalty for Lifeboat, well, the battling behind has given him a chance. He's got fresher tyres than Volakongen too, to try and get out of that range and give himself a bit better chance of P2. His pace isn't far off Oscar at all. It's held around 1.5 seconds for the last few laps, so Lifeboat going very, very well, and the gap extending behind Volakongen, unable to stay within that 3-second window again. Older tyres certainly not helping, but Lifeboat showing cracking pace out there, staying very much with Oscar, and that 3-second penalty not mattering for much at the moment.
Yeah, Volakongen is really under the cosh here, knows that there's a second place very much up for grabs with the penalty. Lifeboat's got almost handed to him, but he can't open the gift that's been wrapped for him. That's not going to be good news for his late championship push. He's got to be careful he doesn't fall further back in this train, because Lafferty has stayed glued to the rear wing of that Papaya McLaren car as we come through the Casio Triangle for the 13th time with these guys. Yasisaki making their way down pit road to get shot of their medium tyres. Lifeboat fastest lap of the race, 30-point flat. Volakongen might be feeling a bit flat by the time we get to turn 1, because the RB looking menacingly in the rear view mirrors. Here comes Lafferty to try and nab third place back from Volakongen, net third place I should say, and he does so to some tune. Volakongen pushed back down behind Lafferty into net 4th position. Even Nye wasn't particularly close to make any real impression either, try and put Volakongen under even more pressure. What that tells me is Volakongen just doesn't have the pace of the two drivers in front of him.
How much is that one lap offset hurting him? I must be asking that question. And well, Yasuo Saki has just came in. Raidadal doing the same sort of strategy, still out there on mediums. We're at half distance in this race, and he's still soldiering on. It's a phenomenal effort to take them this far. But I do wonder what prospects he has further in the race. We'll see if Volakongen, whether he's just struggling or whether one lap older tyres is really that much of a difference. He's getting distance out of DRS immediately from Lafferty. Lafferty putting him right on the edge. Volakongen fighting with all he's got, but at the moment, the man in 4th in the standings has worked his way into contention in the last few rounds. Really struggling out there, and if you're getting dropped out of DRS straight up, then he's going to have a very long day defending from those cars behind.
Lafferty trying to put him under pressure, close the gap by half a second to Lifeboat on this tour. Volakongen, I think, is just about done enough. Burning battery on the run down into 130R means that he is going to be comfortably within the 1 second window and won't fall out of the DRS range of Lafferty in front, and that could be crucial with the tyre disadvantage that he has got. Oscar bangs in the fastest lap of the race, first driver into the 1 minute 29s. Lafferty though 29.3. Hold that, everybody. That is absolutely rapid pace from Lafferty. Yes, he had a lovely bit of DRS down the main straight, but that is some serious wheels. Has he still got the life left in the tyres though? That is the big question. 3.1 seconds off the back of Lifeboat. The gap between Oscar and Lifeboat has stabilised as well, around about a second and a half, as now the only driver yet to make a stop in this race. Ryder has come out 4.5 seconds off the back of Lawrence. He's 8 seconds off the back of this group of cars that we're looking at now, from Lafferty down to Fraser. He's got a lot of racing to do in the second half, hasn't he, Ryder?
Yeah, we saw in the first few laps that he was very willing to take risks and go on the offensive, even in a track like Suzuka. We'll see if he can get across to these guys. It's going to be a very difficult task, and yeah, we'll see what he can do in the last laps. These hards will still be feeling pretty good for most of these drivers. Again, Lafferty, he's burning a lot of battery. He's going all in to try and distance these guys behind. Volakongen managing to see off those attacks for the time being, but very much hanging in the balance, and if he makes one error, that's going to put him out of range. Just 9/10 is the gap. He's got a bit more battery to burn on this run. The gap just tipping over 1 second very briefly, but Volakongen with a little bit more battery to use, managing to save that and actually bring the gap down considerably. He seems to have some low wings on that McLaren too, so he's doing all he needs to do and a mistake from Lafferty up in front is going to bring him a little bit nearer, of course. This is not great news for Lifeboat. The fact that Lafferty is pushing so hard and going extremely fast out then, it's giving him a bit more pressure in terms of holding that 3-second gap than there was when Volokongen was leading the line. So Lafferty's charge putting Lifeboat in under a bit of pressure, and actually it is funny, when you're not running in a DRS train, actually a lot of the times you're pushing harder. So the likes of Oscar and Lifeboat and Lafferty are running in clean air, not really battling other cars on the track, but they're increasing their pace in relation to all that, just trying to race against each other even though they're not near each other on the track. Rydal, we were talking about his charge, but that penalty's not going to do him any favours.
Not at all. 6 seconds now, I think, for Rydal. And it's interesting, the discussion about whether you're driving reactively or proactively, because I think the likes of Oscar and Lifeboat, yes, they will be reacting to the punches thrown by the likes of Lafferty. That gap has stabilised. Realistically, it's just been hovering for the last 2 laps around about 3 seconds. I don't think Lifeboat will be too concerned by that if Lafferty is pushing as hard as we think he is. Surely those front tyres in particular going to take a bit of a beating, and come lap 24, lap 25, he's going to start to fall off the pace a little bit. So Lifeboat just needs to try and keep this in check, keep this charge from Lafferty in check. He's doing a very decent job at the moment, if Oscar is just eking out that gap, nearly 2 seconds now between the McLaren and the Alpine. I think the discussion about wings as well is very interesting, because I was going to make the comment as well. Volokongen is clearly running significantly lower wings than Lafferty, especially in front of him, as Azim makes his way into the pit lane. Now, it's an interesting decision from Volokongen. It wouldn't have been determined by where he qualified, of course, but maybe it's a reason why he qualified slightly down the order, wanted to try and make up some places in the race. But when overtaking is this difficult, plus with the lower wings, your tyre wear's going to be a bit higher. Do you think that's a wise decision from him? Do you think he'll be looking back at that going, maybe I should have gone for a slightly higher setup?
Yeah, I think qualifying always has to be a big priority around this track. Of course, he may just be more comfortable driving with lower wings even over a single lap. That's if I'm talking about me personally, I also prefer using lower wings generally, even over a single lap. So that could be something that he's favouring. But certainly while he's following in this dirty air, especially, the car just isn't going to be getting the bite in the rotation that the man in front of him is going to get, and he's struggling to follow through these high-speed corners. He seems to have enough pace generally over the course of the lap to keep Lafferty honest and keep himself just about in that DRS range. He does get pushed to the edge, but so is Evan Nye behind him. He, despite the fresher tyres, is on the edge of that 1 second range to Volokongen himself. So I think Lafferty is quite simply going very, very fast and putting these guys under a great deal of pressure. Volokongen managing to respond. There is that, of course, that question of tyre wear, and he did come in earlier on the first stint, so that's a good point to maybe look out for later in the race, and whether Volokongen can keep this sort of pace up.
100%. Shout out to Finlay as well. We saw him pick up front wing damage a few laps ago. Has managed to stay in this DRS train that goes from third place Lafferty down to himself in P9. This is one of the circuits where you don't really want to have front wing damage. That's going to hamper you quite significantly through the first sector in particular. So doing a really, really commendable job is the second Haas car. Opportunity for both Haases to finish inside the points paying positions. Lawrence 3.6 off the back of Finlay. Rydal with a 6-second penalty, 2-3 seconds that he's picked up for corner cutting, and Azim hasn't really shown any real pace. We'll see what he's got on the medium tyres, but wasn't particularly speedy on the hards in the first stint of this race. 10 laps to go. The gap is now over 2 seconds between Oscar and Lifeboat. Oscar doing what he likes, and he very much likes what he's doing out in front, and we're still seeing the gap hover between Lifeboat and Lafferty. 2.8 seconds, 2.7 it is at the moment, has been as large as 3.5, been hovering around 3.0 in recent laps. I think this is going to be a battle that goes all the way to the flag, and Volokongen needs to think about his championship here, because there is a second place up for grabs, and that would only be a 3-point loss to Oscar, sorry, because of that pole position that the lead McLaren picked up.
Yeah, he is at the moment holding fairly nicely. He isn't having to drain that battery all the way, so I do think Volokongen is feeling a bit better than he was a few laps ago. He's again being put under pressure from Lafferty, but actually following him is, I think, giving him more of a chance of beating Lifeboat than he otherwise had. We saw that when he was leading this train, the gap to Lifeboat was opening up exponentially. It was rapidly gaining in favour of the Alpine driver, and so Volokongen actually, he is battling with Lafferty. He's trying to beat him, and I'm sure if there's any opportunity he will take it, but actually he's been given more of a chance against the man currently P2 on the road with the way that Lafferty in front is running. I doubt that Volokongen would be able to run this quickly if he was the one leading the line. That said, Lafferty has drained pretty much all of his battery, pushing so hard as Rydal brings his evening to a close, and we're down to 12 drivers in this race. Lafferty has burned off pretty much all of his battery at this point. The gap back over 3 seconds, so that hard work he's putting in to bridge that gap, I wonder if that's going to start to fade here. If he can try and recover some battery, they'll go after it. But Volokongen behind, I think he's fairly happy with the way this is unfolding right now.
He is. Maybe not if Lafferty just starts to leak a little bit of time. Remember, it was 2.7 seconds on the previous lap, 2.9 seconds now. Lifeboat continuing to lose time to Oscar out in front, who's looking serene, it has to be said, in the lead of this Grand Prix, doing what he needs to do, knowing that the championship is very much in his court with the absence of Alex Lofer and Owen, who has dropped in the chat. What a race, everybody doing the same strat. We've had a couple of drivers go for the alternate strategy. Hasn't exactly worked out brilliantly for them. Ryder retired from the race, and Azim finds himself down in P11 as it stands. And considering Azim scored points in all of the first 7 races perhaps, of this season, we're running down in P12, and that has been, well, that's P11, sorry, and that is his effective race position. He isn't really showing any kind of pace that'll draw him towards Lawrence. That is not going to be good news for the Williams.
He may benefit from Finlay's penalty at the very least if he wants to grab some sort of points. Finlay has finally been dropped by the train, and also that the front wing damage goes to mention to dirty air as many times as possible. But yeah, Finlay I do think is struggling more and more with tyre wear out there, having to lean on the tyres much harder, trying to stay with them with that dirty air, and his pace does seem to be fading. Front wing damage not doing him any favours at all. That gap still hovering right around 3 seconds between Lafferty and Lifeboat. That is the chief battle out there on the circuit at the moment, as everyone just seemingly just able to follow Lafferty and not able to apply any sort of pressure. Oscar still a picture of serenity up at the front of the field. 2.5 second lead. That is going to go out to 5.5 seconds in terms of net position. Well, Lafferty's net P2 5.1 seconds behind him at the moment. But Oscar very calm. He's just got to bring the car home now. He faces very little real threat on the track right now, just running his own race and going very strongly. But his teammate Volokongen, this lap is one where he's struggling a little bit to stay within range. That gap right around 1 second, and this run through Spoon is going to mean so much here.
100%. Lafferty taking a chunk out of Lifeboat on this lap and putting Volokongen very much under the cosh, and the microscope is now on the second McLaren. Can he keep his championship hopes alive? Sim championship hopes, albeit in this race. 1.0 seconds. There we can see the advantage of having the lower wings on the run down into 130R. That gap drops by nearly 0.2 of a second by the time we reach the Casio triangle. It is under 0.2 of a second now, and that is going to keep him very much in this fight between himself and Lafferty. The question for him now, as Evan Nye gets very wobbly coming out of the Casio triangle, means that Volokongen is going to be under absolutely zero pressure on the run down into turn 1 with the lower wings. Is there going to be a point for Volokongen that he can actually get close enough to Lafferty to make that move in the last couple of laps and try and benefit from Lifebout's penalty? Because at the moment, yes, the gap's not extending. It's 3.5 seconds between 4th and 2nd at the moment. But if he is going to finish 2nd in this race, he's going to have to make some kind of impression in the final 3 or 4 laps.
Looking at the relative pace of both cars, I mean, he does have a bit more battery to use, but I think he's going to be relying on a Lafferty mistake and probably a Lifebout mistake if you're talking about P2 in the end. He's pushing hard and actually putting Evan Nye under pressure, and potentially the Mercedes driver on the edge. He's got battery to use as well. These guys all being put to the sword by the searing pace of Lafferty, who's bringing the gap down even further than it has been in the last couple of laps. 2.5 seconds is the difference. Volokongen and Evan Nye respectively fighting away with both themselves and each other out there. Volokongen seems to be safe on this lap. Evan Nye, who doesn't seem to have that same straight line speed advantage. He's quick in the corners, that's for sure, as Volokongen leaks time through the Spoon curve, but he's managing to equalise it on the straight. But I think right now, Tom, all he can do is just stay within that DRS range. I think any on-track pressure seems unlikely at this stage.
100%. Doing a good job, though, you have to say, to manage this gap to Lafferty, considering the pace advantage that Lafferty's got in the corners in particular. Add on top of that dirty air, add on top of that the fact that Volokongen has a lap older tyres as well. I think it's been a commendable effort to keep himself very much in the ballpark going into the final 5 laps of this race. And everybody's still bottled up in this train as well. Haven't seen anything from Mario Sorn, who was running in P4 before the pit stops. He's been the big loser, dropped to P7, having to stay out a lap longer because Lifebout, his team, it was only about 1.5 seconds up the road didn't want to double stack, hasn't been able to get those places back from Evan Nye, from Nikasaurus, and from Volokonga critically as well. Finlay with that front wing down, as we mentioned it a couple of laps ago. Pace has fallen off an absolute cliff, and from being P11, Asm very shortly I think he's going to find himself in position number 9. The Williams on the medium compact tyres that are singing a very nice tune at the moment as he goes through Dunlop right underneath the rear wing of Finlay. We'll stay on board with him because I think we're probably going to be seeing a move maybe even up into the hairpin. That's how closely he can follow because of how hampered Finlay is, and as I say that, Asm gets a little bit wobbly over the second Degner.
Doesn't get the best run out of it, and he's a bit too far back to apply that squeeze, that pressure. He gets very close in the middle of the hairpin, and I think, yeah, if he had a cleaner run through the second Degner, he would have managed to pull that one off. Asm, I don't think he's gaining much on the train further in front, so I do think he may have to settle for just this. It's a commendable effort on this strategy, but yeah, I don't think there's much more on offer for him. At least he is giving us a bit of a show, though, as he chases down the man in front of him. Finlay with plenty of straight line speed, though. He does have a little bit lower drag, of course, courtesy of that front wing damage, but I do think on this main straight, he's not going to be able to keep him at bay, and probably Lawrence as well. There's contact on the way in, and round goes the Haas, and Lawrence goes through. There's contact too on the exit as him, and Lawrence going wheel to wheel now on the way out, and in the end that battle comes to blows. Now they run side by side, both of them with DRS, and it is the Williams driver who will pull out in front. Maybe I'm not gonna. Oh, as Lawrence lunges to the inside of turn 2, and that was never ever gonna come off. So another bad-tempered battle further down the field. Asm does get the move done at the very least, but I think we'll have a look back on that one in the couple of days to come. Asm, though, P9 is on the road, and he'll do all he can to maximise his chances later on in the race. But 7.4 seconds to the train in front, extended, of course, too, by all that battling and that half spin there from Finlay. I think in the end, P9 is always going to be getting on the road.
100%. It did look to me, I'll throw my hat in the ring, it looked like Asm just outbraked himself going into the Casio triangle, tapped the back of Finlay, and we saw it earlier on in the race where even just a little tap, that can really unsettle the car, and Finlay finding himself going sideways, almost trying the reverse entry drift into the Casio triangle, courtesy of the little shove that he got from Asm. Lawrence trying to lap up that one, but couldn't quite force his way past the Williams, and yes, as you said as well, that optimistic, let's say, look down the inside into turn number 2 that thankfully he didn't make stick, otherwise I think Asm might have been upside down on the run into the sweeps of 3 and 4. Still pretty staccato in this battle from 3rd down into 8th with Fraser. 7/10 of a second, the gap between Lafferty and Volokonga. The gap out in front over 3 seconds. Lafferty gets closer to Lifeboat, and then Lifeboat just pulls out a little bit of time. They're going blow for blow at the moment. I think the gap has dropped down as low as 2.4 seconds. I think on the previous lap, Lafferty got it down to, now back up to 2.6. You can see the advantage the RB has through the first set of curves in particular. Really confident, can really attack on this on these tyres, and with the setup that he's got on the car, just leave Volokonga a little bit vulnerable. But it's still up in the air for Lifeboat if he's going to finish on the podium. As it stands, he'd get it by about half a tenth if Volokonga can just keep tabs on Lafferty in front.
Yeah, that gap very much on the edge. That's going to be one to look out for. And Volokonga not the best run through the Degner, so he's going to have to fight on once again through the hairpin and through Spoon Curve. He is struggling for grip and a bit of rear locking too. Is this going to be the moment that eventually the elastic is broken? 1.2 seconds the gap, and now Volokonga has to use all the battery he has at his disposal, and he's got to have a good run heading through Spoon Curve. But Lafferty is so strong through this section of the track. He uses so much of the road. He's so confident. The gap's still at 1.2 seconds. He's got more battery to use. He typically does gain a couple of tenths on this straight, so can he work his way back into play and continue getting pulled along? There is the detection point, and I think he has managed to rescue it. That is the power of those low wings. He does run wide a little bit heading in to the Casio triangle. He's certainly going to be under pressure on the next lap, but that is the biggest scare Volokonga has had for the moment. He barely survives.
I think this is where the opportunity for Volokonga to pick up P3 is still very much a possibility, because he is at his fastest in that final sector. The run coming out of Spoon down into the Casio triangle, then gets a good exit out of it, if he can get a good exit out of it. That might just be the thing that drops him just under 3 seconds to Lifebout in front. 2.4 the gap. Lafferty is just eking out the time, getting closer and closer to Lifebout as the laps come through. Just under 3 to go now with Oscar 3.5 clear out in front. He's been untroubled ever since the first round of stops, been comfortable out in front, and will take a big lead in the championship as we go into the final 3 rounds of the season. Volokongen again under pressure coming through the deckers. How much has he got left as we go into the hairpin? The gap was 1.2 at this stage on the previous lap. It is going to be over a second. I think it's going to be about 1.1. Yes, 1.1 just under as we come up towards Spoon.
He got a much cleaner run through the hairpin this time as opposed to the last lap when he was all over the place, rear locking. Again, he is probably going to be put out of range here through Spoon Curve, but as long as he's within about 2/10, and he is certainly within 2/10 on this occasion, then he is all good to go. He can easily bridge that gap on the run down towards 130R, and look at the gap to Lifeboat. Lifeboat, he must have made an error somewhere. That gap's gone down by about half a second on this lap. Volokongen is now within that 3-second range. Lafferty certainly is, in fact comfortably so. The gap under 2 seconds. Lifeboat, he's had a bit of a scruffy lap. He does a 31.2. Lafferty is 4/10 quicker on that last lap, so Lifeboat, he's run a brilliant race up to this point, but the pressure mounting in these last 2 laps now.
And the question now goes, does Lifeboat even finish in P4? Because if Evan Knight can get his skates on, 2.5 seconds, 2.6 the gap between Lifeboat and Volokongen. If Evan Knight can just get as close as he possibly can to Volokongen going on to the final lap, he'll give himself an opportunity of picking up another couple of points. And we need to shout at Evan Knight because obviously came up from F2 for the Hungarian Grand Prix, finished on the podium in that very first race, has shown some real turns of speed. And this will be another very impressive result for him, showing that he is very much now in the right split, absolutely dominating F2, wasn't he, before he came up into PSGL PSF1 for the second half of season number 40, and I'm fairly confident that if he signs up next season for 41, he will very much be part of the rostrum.
And he's certainly proving that he belongs, inside the top 5. Once again, he still had a solid race last time out in Kota with P7, so he's scoring very consistent points, and certainly showing that he belongs here in PSF1. Can he take advantage of anything? He has worked hard to stay with Volokongen. He's been close to dropping out of that DRS as well, but just like he was in Hungary, he's ever tenacious, managing to cut out the mistakes at crucial points in the race. He's had constant pressure pretty much from Nico Sauce, but has it cracked, running very nicely out there. But further up in front, this battle for P2, in terms of, even P3 on the road may not be over, because Volokongen is as close as he's ever been as we head on to the last lap, but ultimately he doesn't have the battery, he doesn't have the fighting power, both of them draining their battery to completion, and Volokongen, he was near, that's as close as he's been, but is that his only real offensive though? Lafferty will try and hang on to the rest of the lap. Volokongen just didn't have the battery at that crucial point, but he has drawn nearer, and he's certainly within that range of Lifeboat now.
100% should inherit that final spot on the podium. Was charging towards Lafferty down into turn number 1, but just didn't quite have the battery. Lafferty playing it wise, street-wise, you could say, and there should be a second place for the RB, who's also been showing some really good form in recent weeks. Evan Knight, very much touch and go as well. Can he pick up that final spot inside the top 4 with the penalty that Lifeboat currently has looming over his head? He's dropped nearly 5 seconds to Oscar, really struggling in the last 3 or 4 laps. His Lifeboat going to finish second on the road, barring any whoopsies, but he's going to be under some severe pressure to try and not lose too many places.
Here we go now, that is going to be teetering on the edge. Oscar, he is away and gone, nearly 5 seconds of difference. It's going to be probably about 7 seconds he's going to have to the rest of the field. It is domineering display, and he will be rewarded, of course, with the championship lead. He is away and gone, and quite simply tonight, no one has been able to touch him.
From stateside to Suzuka, Oscar had to do the job last week. He had to do the job this week. And my word is a perfect 10 out of 10 from Oscar. He rounds the final corner in the championship battle. He has taken a huge step towards lifting it in a few weeks' time. It's a dominant performance around the Suzuka circuit. Lifeboat cuts the beam in second. Where does he end up? It is 5th. It's 6th. Wow. He lost a lot on that final lap. Missed out on a top 5 by 0.06 of a second. You feel like that's harsh considering the race that he drove. That is the way the cookie crumbles when you pick up the penalties for corner cutting. Lafferty P2, Volokongen just about keeping himself in contention for the championship with 3 races to go, finishing in position number 3. Quiet race from the guys behind. Evan Knight once again impressing in 4th. Nico Sauce on his return after a few weeks out, P5 as well. And then it is said Lifeboat tumbling from 2nd down to 6th on the last lap. But it is Oscar. In the absence of Alex Lofer, in the absence of Owen, he had to step up. And my word, has he done so.
a third victory of the season, a second in a row, and you'd have to say if it wasn't for that disconnection at Silverstone, his championship lead would be extremely hefty, and dare I say it would be pretty much over at this stage. It's not over yet if we do see more of Alex Lofer and more of Owen in the last couple of rounds, but that is a huge step for SCI Oscar. I believe his championship lead is going to be, I want to say 15 points after this race. We'll clear that up later on. But yeah, Volikongen will be relieved, I think, to recover nicely in that race, and kind of got a bit of an assist from Lafferty throughout the duration of this race. So he's kept himself in the hunt, but yeah, Oscar, given how consistent he's been throughout most of this season, I mean, that is what, in however many rounds he's managed to complete cleanly. I believe that's, yeah, so that's 7 rounds he's managed to complete cleanly, and 5 races inside the top 2. If he keeps up that rate of point scoring from here on out, this championship at the moment looks to be going his way. But of course, there's a long way to go. But if he does what he's been doing, then he's going to be very difficult to stop.
100%. There is a long way to go. He started this 2 points behind Alex Lofer. His haul of 17 points. Didn't quite get the full 18. Fastest lap went to Azam in the Williams, who picks up an extra point. But it is 17 points, which means he holds a 15-point lead in the championship over Alex Lofer. If he does get that wheel issue sorted, he's got quite the mountain to climb in the final 3 rounds of the season. And speaking of them, let's have a look at what is coming up in the next couple of weeks. And we start off. We go from Suzuka back over to North America. From the Serenity to the Spectacle, we will roll the dice in the Sin City of Las Vegas, a jackpot round where we could see the champion of Oscar crowned. Penultimate race in a couple of weeks' time. Maybe it'll be a bit of samba magic there in Brazil that will decide the championship crown. The motorsport mecca that is Interlagos. And then we go to the season finale, Mexico City. The altitude rises, but the curtain will fall on season number 40. And that will most definitely be where we have a season 40 showdown. But will Oscar have picked up the crown by then? It really depends on the availability of Oscar and of Alex Lofer, not of Oscar, of Owen and Alex Lofer.
Yeah, certainly. Of course, well, Alex is still within range, and Owen certainly is too. Again, when they've been here, they've been on the podium consistently and winning in many rounds. Again, hopefully we do see more of them, because this is I mean, it's PSF1. We deserve a big championship fight right to the death, but we'll have to wait and see what happens in these last 3 rounds. Certainly Oscar in the pound seat, but there is an awful long way to go. We're just going to have to wait and see how that's going to unfold. Vegas is the next one on the agenda, of course. Volikongen still in range. It is certainly, those are the only 4 who you could really say have any shot at the championship, but there is one man who's comfortably out on top. I guess it remains to be seen, because as I said at the start of the stream, Vegas is a track that can throw a spanner in the works, can throw a surprise. So what we've been treated to throughout this season, you never know. Things could all change next week.
100%. That is the one to watch for. Vegas should be an absolute cracker. Sometimes you can get a bit of weather around Vegas as well on the F1 25 game, so stay tuned for that in a week's time. I think what's interesting as well about the championship battle is I don't think it's unfair for me to say that of those 3 main contenders, excluding Volikongen from this situation, Oscar probably is the 3rd quickest out of them. But the attendance for the other 2 has put him in a position where he's had to perform and he's stepped up when he's needed to. He's picked up a dominant victory this evening. Last week he was in total control at COTA, managed to race absolutely beautifully to pick up what was the 2nd win of the season. Now he's doubled up with his 3rd win tonight. And I think that's shown a very interesting side of Oscar that maybe we didn't see earlier on in the campaign, where it was so close between himself, Alex Lofer, and Owen, where the other 2 maybe just had a little bit of a leg up. But he's really come on strong in these last few races when it's mattered most. And that is, of course, the sign of a champion.
It certainly is, and I do love watching Oscar race, because he makes some incredibly smart decisions. Again, he was the quickest tonight. That was out of the question, really. But we saw, I mean, the way he won that race in Imola, for example, snatching away the win, I think it was from Tony Roche, with that spectacular move at Tamburello. It's stuff like that that's really setting him apart. I would agree he's not as quick as Owen, certainly not as quick as Alex in terms of throughout this season. I mean, look at the pole positions that Alex is able to pick up, but he's there or thereabouts. He's turned up when it matters, and he's generally, for the most part, done everything right in the races, maximizing your opportunities, and that is what wins championships.
And what we can say as well is Owen's just popped in the Discord and said that he's quit F1, so we won't be seeing him ever again. So I guess that puts it down to 2 runners and riders left in the championship battle. And we don't know whether Alex Lofer will be back come season's end. So it might be a bit of a damp squid to finish off, but we've got 3 fantastic tracks and should be 3 fantastic races to finish us off. But sticking on the theme of fantastic, it is sim racing setups, everybody. Make sure you check them out if you want to unlock that extra performance. Use those pro F125 car setups. They're developed and tested by the very drivers you see racing week in, week out here at PSGL Esports, and stable setups for every single track, quali or race, dry or wet. Optimal strategies available as well. Of course, compatible with all of the platforms, all of them available as well for just £49.49 at simracingsetup.com. And if you use the code PSGL, you'll get a 5% discount. Why would you not head on over there and just try and make yourself just that little bit fast? Because I think we all absolutely want to be as fast as we possibly can.
Yeah, certainly a great deal. I may be having a look at that. I'm certainly someone who could use a bit of pace, especially after watching these drivers, the very best, and on the PlayStation platform, go at it. So make sure to check that out. And yeah, that is I think going to be just about that though for tonight. We've seen a big change in the championship. We'll see how it goes going forward. Still 3 great races to be treated to further down the line. So I suppose, Tom, we're just going to have to get back into waiting mode and see what PSF1 in Season 40 has to offer in the weeks to come.
See what happens. Last 3 races of season number 40. Hopefully they're going to be very, very exciting. Before we head off, obviously, the preliminaries first, pleasure as always to bring to you PSGL PSF1. Wasn't a classic of a race today. We thought maybe we were hoping there was a bit of rain that could spice things up in the race, but I think this track just doesn't necessarily work on the physics engine F125 with the way that the handling model works, with the dirty air, with the way the tyres overheat a little bit more on this game as well. Racing can just be a little bit trickier, but Las Vegas, that should be a banger, everybody. Stay tuned in 7 days' time. But Dan Dacker, pleasure having you alongside me. As always, where can people find you on the old socials if they want to find out what you are up to?
So you can find me on Twitter at Dacker23. That's capital D, lowercase a, capital K, lowercase e, capital H23. That's my handle. Be free to check me out. I'd much appreciate it if you drop me a follow.
Make sure you get involved in that one, everybody. If you're interested in what I'm doing on, I need to remember this because there's so many different tabs. I apologise. I should make it simpler. Twitter and Twitch, it's TW06. On Instagram and TikTok, Wilco.coms and Wilco.darts if you're interested in that. But thank you, everybody, for watching and joining us. Pleasure as always. We will see you in a week's time. Sin City of Las Vegas. Who will hit the jackpot? Will it be Oscar? And will it be the crowning moment for the Papaya McLaren car? The Constructors' battle all but sealed as well with a 1-3 for McLaren. Everything to play for, though, with championships on the line in Las Vegas. Until then, thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next week. Goodbye, everybody.